Hi guys, welcome back. It's Mrs. Peterson, that lady who teaches art, and today I'm going to show you some different techniques you can use with watercolor painting so that when you're working on your watercolor seascape, you have some different ideas for how you can create the color with your brushes. So you're going to get a big piece of watercolor paper like this, and I already have 8 boxes on here for you. You're going to go ahead and write your name on the top, first name, last initial, and your class. And then we're going to gather up your supplies. Everyone's going to need a set of watercolors. You're going to need a little cup for your water, and then a big brush and a little brush. Or we might say a thick brush and a skinny brush. And then the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go down here and do number 8, which I know is kind of backwards. There's a thing called resist. Resist means it's going to resist the paint or not let the paint come through. So you can buy that, but I like to just use rubber cement. So we're going to just take the rubber cement and just paint a little bit in this box. We don't want to cover the whole thing because I want to show you what can happen with it, but just put, a little bit in there. When that dries, it's going to stay white under there, and then I can paint in that box. And then after the paint dries, I can kind of rub the rubber cement off with my finger, and it will stay white where the resist was. So this is really good when you're making your seascape, maybe for clouds, so that you make sure that no paint gets on your clouds. Or if you have like a white cap blowing in on your ocean, starting with some rubber cement is a really great thing to make sure it blocks any color from getting in those spots where you want white. Because there's no such thing as white watercolor. Okay, so the first one says dry paper, dry brush. So I'm going to start with my paper being dry, and I'm going to start with my brush. Now, my brush is actually already a little bit wet, and you're going to have to get a little bit wet because if your brush was completely dry and your paint was completely dry, you wouldn't be able to make any color. But what you can do is go over the top of your cup and just kind of squeeze out the extra water, and you'll have a paper towel at your desk you can wipe your fingers on. We're going to just start with red, and you're just going to load up your brush. And each time I'm just going to do like an S curve and see what the quality of the line is. Okay, it's pretty dark with that color because the water is what makes it lighter. So there we have our dry brush and dry paper. The next one says dry paper, wet brush. So now I'm going to clean out my brush, and I do that just by rubbing it on the bottom. When my water gets really bad, we'll change it, but right now I think we're okay because we're going to go to orange, and this is close to orange, so it should be okay. I'm going to squeeze out the extra water. It says dry paper and wet brush. So I'm going to have more water on my brush, get the orange, and you can see how that one's much more watery, much lighter. So it really depends on what you're going for when you do your seascape, how much water you want in your brush. Okay, the next one says wet paper, dry brush, and then fourth one says wet paper. Now, depending on how gross your paper is right now, your water, we're going to use yellow and green, and I don't think that this is a good color for yellow and green. So I'm going to take my little cup, and at your table there's going to be an empty bucket like this. And everyone is just going to use this as their garbage can for water. So when your water is gross, you're going to carefully dump it in the bucket. You don't need to touch the bucket at all. It can just stay in the middle of your table. And then you're each going to have a cup of clean water at your table. And you're just going to give yourself a little bit more water. We don't need a ton of water for this project. And we don't want to spend a lot of time today filling up the cup. So just a little bit in the bottom would be great. Okay, we're going to take our thick brush again now that we have clean water. And we're going to wet our paper in box 3. And we're going to wet our paper in box 4 because both of those start with wet paper. And then this one says dry brush. So I'm going to switch back to my skinny brush that I know is pretty dry. I'm just going to get a little bit of it wet, and I'm going to go to the next color, which is yellow. My brush just is not very wet. I'm going to make my S. Clean out my brush every time. Scrub it on the bottom, and I can wring it out and then set it down beside me. And then for the next one, it's a wet brush, and I'm going to go to the next color, which is green. So lots of water. And you can see how that one kind of feathers on the edge. Really pretty effect, and if that's what you're looking for in your seascape, then you'll know you want your paper to be wet and your brush to be wet. Okay, go ahead and clean out your brush on the bottom of your cup and then wring it out. And then let's take a look at the next one. The next one says flat wash. So flat wash just means we want one shade from the top to the bottom, filling in the whole thing. So I like to start by wetting that area down. And then we're going to go to blue. And we're just going to try to get the whole thing the same shade of blue. Now, I want to show you what you don't want. You don't want it dark up in this corner and then lighter the rest of the box. You want the whole thing the same shade. So this might take you a little bit of time to work on getting it the same everywhere. I can see I have two pretty light spots there. Bring back some color in the middle and try to blend those in. Okay, that's a flat wash. Just when it's all the same shade in that whole box. Clean out your brush. Okay, now we're going to do purple, and this is a gradation. Gradation is when it goes, it's kind of like ombre. That used to be a thing that people did to their hair where it went from dark to medium to light. We're going to do that here. We're going to start with dark up at the top. So I'm using a lot of paint, but not a lot of water. I'm just going to keep painting out the color of my brush until about halfway. Then I might want to add a little more water to my brush to kind of get rid of some of that color. And then in the end, we're going to let it go completely to white by getting a lot of water, barely any paint, and then it goes to white. Now I want to go back and make it even darker right up here. So I'm going to take even more paint back to the top. So you can see that it goes from the darkest shade and then it gets lighter as it goes down. Okay. Now we just used the purple, but now we're going to do something different. We're going to try to make purple. So I'm going to clean my brush really good. And since we're going to try to make purple, I think my water is still okay. If I was going to try to use yellow right now, this water would not be okay. I would want to dump that in the garbage can. But I think it's going to be okay since we're using colors to make purple. But you may not use your purple paint for this. So we're going to start with your red, and you're going to come down past halfway. So here's halfway in my box. I want to go past that with red. Fill in that whole area with red. This is variegated. It's going to be how two colors combine. So notice I have the top, past half, all filled in with red. Okay, I'm going to clean out my brush now. And I'm going to fill about the same amount, but this time with blue. So I'm going to start at the bottom. And it's going to be just solid blue down here. No big deal. But then as I paint over the red, hopefully it's going to turn kind of purplish. There in the middle. Do not paint all the way up the box. We want to see some red at the top, purple in the middle, and blue at the bottom. It turned out pretty well. All right, clean up your brush. And while the resist is still on here, it's dry, and it's still on there. I haven't taken it off yet. Then I can pick a color to paint in there. I'm going to paint brown. But you can pick your own color for the resist. It's up to you. I'm just going to paint across in a cross-hatching, like diagonal technique. You can kind of see how it beads up across that. Okay. When this dries, I'll be able to rub the rubber cement off and I'll be able to see the white. I'm going to let this dry and then I'll show you that as soon as that happens. Okay, so my resist has been drying, and we'll probably undo this the next class for you guys. You won't do this today. But the next class, when this is really good and dry, you're going to take your finger and you're going to rub that rubber cement, and it kind of comes off in like little chunks, like almost like eraser does when you erase. And you got to push a little bit with a little bit of pressure. But you can see that where that resist was, it left my paper very white. Okay, and that's what resist does for us. When you're all done, you're going to clean up your stuff. The water color thing hopefully doesn't have too much water on it, so it should be able to dry on the actual drying rack. We're going to dump any extra water at your table into the bucket. So my little cup like this can go into the trash bucket of water. And also this big one, just so we're not carrying water all the way across my room, we'll just dump the extra water down into here. And now we can carry the bucket to the bathroom to dump that. Brushes need to be washed with soap and water. And then the watercolor paints can go set carefully back in the box to dry upright so the paint doesn't spill all over. But that, you guys, is how we create some different techniques with watercolor. You can use these for your seascape that we're going to be working on for our next project. All right, you guys, I can't wait to see what you create.